Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, so I guess we can start now. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm very happy to welcome you all to this YouTube live session today. So we'll be having a conversation with Chetan Shivaprasad, sir, who's an expert in nature-inspired designs. Yeah, so let's tell a few words about yourself.
Okay, I'm an architect by profession. I've been running a design firm for the last 23 years now, called Kham Design. It's an architectural practice space, working on the concepts of space. And we've been working on various issues of sustainability, issues of how do we get really inspired through nature and start working on interpreting them into our architectural expressions. Also, I run another institute called Humpy Center for Design, which is being visualized as a hub for design dialogue, through which we do a lot of workshops. Could be on nature-inspired design thinking. We do a lot of webinars. It's more of a dialogue center, very much like what's happening with IIT Madras. So, but not to that scale, though. Yeah, and it's based out of Humpy.
Okay. Yeah, that's great to know, sir. So, as the title of the session is Nature-Inspired Design Thinking, so my first question would be like, why nature-inspired design thinking, and what is the difference between design thinking and nature-inspired design thinking?
Okay, I think that's quite a large question. I would first want to talk about why we really need to look at nature as an inspiration, right? So the issue goes to this, that we as human beings have occupied this place, let's say, for the maximum of around 50 to 60,000 years, which is our recorded history. Right? I'm not too clear about the dates, the timeline, but say approximately around 50,000 years. But Earth as a planet has been evolving for the last 4.5 billion years. Which means that our presence on planet Earth has been quite minuscule, has been quite, has been just a blip in the evolution of Earth, right? And nature, for sure, in this 4.5 billion years of evolution, has gone through many cycles of learning and relearning and coming out with design solutions. That's why we have objects which are so beautiful to look at, which have forms which have a reason, and is not just there just because of just being beautiful, but having some kind of a function attached to it. There's a reason behind everything that nature has done, and that's one reason why we really need to look at nature as an inspiration. Because again, if I really look at it, I would want to talk a lot more in terms of the way we live our lives versus the way nature literally leads its cycle, and what is the kind of concerns we need to get into. We have kind of created a huge challenge for ourselves as a species. I think we are one of the most stupidest species on planet Earth, because we are digging our own grave. I can't think of any organism. There are species which dig their own grave, but we are consciously digging our own grave. We might be here from another blip of Earth's evolution, but let's try and delay that as much as possible. Because the kind of evolution we have gone into, the kind of consumption we have gone into, it's like digging our own grave right now.
Yes, sir. But it's really ironical, right? So we think that humans are like the most most successful creation of nature, but ironically, we are actually behaving in the most stupidest way with respect to nature.
Right. The cause for that is basically the way we lead our lives, right? We have a very linear system of leading our lives. All our resources come from Mother Earth. Everything, the pen I use, the iPad on which we are talking today, the chair I sit, the car I drive, all the raw materials for everything we have ever produced on planet Earth comes from Mother Earth. I don't think we borrow anything from the moon yet. We don't borrow anything from Mars yet. We still haven't reached that stage of going and polluting another, or rather making use of another resource, right? So, but after we consume, we are never process of the way we are consuming things. We as a society, we as a species are sending everything back into the planet Earth as a landfill, and not literally looking at it as being food for another process. And that's what we do. We maximum recycle it, or we reuse the 5 hours we use, and then we end up throwing everything into a landfill, thinking that Earth will manage to resolve itself later. It would definitely resolve all the waste we have created, but it would not be for our species. It can become food for another species, but not for us. We might find new organisms which can eat into plastic, right? But it might not be a cyclical system for us. The spirit of Gaia, which is a philosophy of the Greek, talks about this whole idea that Earth will continue to live. It might become a ball of fire, it can become a ball of ice, it can become a ball of water, but it will continue to survive. Earth will continue to survive. It is just that we don't have to save Earth. That's a wrong nomenclature we put to ourselves, saying that let's save Earth. Sorry, we are not saving Earth. We are saving ourselves from our own destruction. So that is the path we need to take. And what better guide than to go for nature as an inspiration? Because nature for billions of years has looked at solving problems, Everything we face today, be it financial problems, be it management problems, be it a product design problems, is already been addressed by nature. It is the most economical way of surviving. It has found ways of creating things which become food for another process immediately. It has found answers to every problem we as human beings are facing today, right? And that's something which we really need to look at as an inspiration. And that's where I think nature-inspired design thinking is a much needed vertical to work on at this point of time.
Yes, sir. So, having understood your interest and also the need for biomimicry or nature-inspired design right now, so can you tell us like one animal or creature which is most fascinated you, like your?
Of recent days, I mean, I've been studying structured light, especially the blue butterfly, monarch butterfly, and that butterfly. Just imagine the what do you say? The wings of the butterfly is made up of a series of, at the nano level, is made up of a series of cone-like structured elements on its wing. And because light, the white light which falls on it disperses and only throws out the blue color, the amazing blue color. And that is being converted. I mean, I was reading about another company which is looking at the structured light which comes out of any of the insects or butterflies, and then converting that into paints, where there's a building which is painted, and because of the daylight which moves and the quality of light which falls on it, the color of the building can change. Excuse me, I'm really sorry.
It's okay.
Right? So I'm really looking at such inspirations from nature. I'll just go on a mute for a second.
Sure.
Excuse me, suddenly I'm getting a little bit of cough from past day.
Sure. Are you okay now?
I'm okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so you actually talked about like how efficient nature is, right? Can you give us some insights on the process of natural selection and how humans can actually inspire from the process of natural selection?
Right. So I think one of the amazing theories we have been introduced to is the theory of evolution by Charles Darwin. It talks about survival of the fittest due to natural selection, right? And it's not just being fit in terms of being strong, but nature by evolution has been selective in terms of removing things which does not work in that ecosystem, and thereby looking at what is the most best way of surviving and developing that species further. Out of the hundreds of people in this who will be looking at this video, not one of us are similar to each other, and we all belong to the same species. So each one have been some kind of a value add into the nature's equation of saying, let me better myself, right? And that is something which helps us really understand how nature has been looking at growth, right? Say there might have been white crows, but due to natural selection, the white crows might have been removed from the equation because they are more prone to being predated upon, right? Or it could be about how the chameleon can change its colors, which is something which is evolved from just being a brown lizard sitting on a green leaf and being eaten away, versus bringing in the small chemical change within its own body so that it could change color on wherever it moves, right? So this kind of habitation is something which I'm very interested to learn from nature and see whether I can use that as a part of my design process. We were designing a school, and we had to span almost 40 feet using very minimal materials. So we were looking at how to span those materials. Then we came across this idea of a shell and the geometry the cell works with, and also of an egg and how that egg breaks. It was a kindergarten, and we were ideating of literally an egg breaking out from the ground and becoming a structure. So we could manage a span of literally 40 feet of width using a very thin 1 inch thick concrete, one or even lesser thick concrete, because of the structural system which we explored from nature. And we can minimize the kind of waste we are creating right now. I'm sure if we look at it at a much more intense level, I would love to design a building which can degenerate and become food for another process after its life. And definitely that's the thought process we need to get into as we're moving forward in terms of material studies and things like that.
Yeah. So we have one question from the audience. Like, what are the opportunities available for biomimicry in India?
Look, we already are seeing effects of climate change. We are already understanding that the waste we create can't just go and become part of a landfill. We have various companies moving into this idea of cradle to cradle rather than cradle to grave. A cradle to cradle concept is what nature really works with, where the end product of any cycle becomes food for another process. Say, for example, the leaves of a tree, as it erupts out, is quite rich with chlorophyll. You see the brilliance of chlorophyll in it. It starts absorbing as much of, doing its work of photosynthesis, and as it ages, as it wears out, it's the chlorophyll starts being removed from that system and starts being flooded into another leaf which is freshly being grown out, and this slowly falls down and fall and becomes some kind of food for insects, and then becomes nitrogen fixtures for its own plant from where it's been shed down, right? So it's a very cyclical system. There's no waste in nature. And if we can start looking at this kind of a concept in terms of design, Could be designing anything, could be designing a product, could be designing a building, could be designing a process, could be designing a management system, could be designing an ecology or financial management system, anything. I see that we will have such design thinkers in the boardroom of any corporate office in the coming years. It is the need that we start looking at how nature solves management systems and put it into a management process for any company. And I think it's a sunrise industry, an industry which has a lot of scope. It's still a lot more at the research level, but a lot of scope. Jane Buer's University of Biomimicry Institute is spearheading this kind of a thought process and creating a lot more thinkers on similar lines across the world. And I'm sure in India, it is going to be a sunrise industry soon.
Okay, sure. Yeah, going back to our like discussion of philosophies and theories related to nature-inspired design. So you mentioned about cradle to grave or cradle-to-cradle approach, right? So how do we actually go about looking at it? For example, if I see an organism and I'm interested in certain aspect of the organism, how do I start incorporating it in my project or uh, design?
Right. First, very frankly, first is about getting into an empathic role of saying, as a designer, as a leader, can I integrate that idea of cradle to cradle into anything which I try to solve, any kind of problem I'm trying to solve? Can I start looking at cradle to cradle as an idea? I think that's the first step we really need to work on. But then I would like to go jump a little bit, madam, because I would like to jump into this idea of what is design thinking, which is design thinking is a very interesting thought process which has started off in various institutions today. It was spearheaded by the Stanford University, which came out with this idea that can I look at how designers think and come out with very fresh ideas of problem solving? And can I use that design thinking process for solving any day-to-day activities in any field, right? That's where it started off. And Stanford University kind of came out with a 5-step process of saying first is empathy, of getting into the shoes of the problem itself and trying to understand the problem at a much larger level. And the second one is to define the problem of what is the problem. I mean, that's the biggest thing of understanding the problem. We need to dwell on the problem statement for a much longer time and allow it to ferment and make us understand what the core issue of that problem statement is. That's the second step of problem solving. The third step is where we get into ideation of thinking and coming out with solutions, right? Could be very unique solutions, could be breaking the norms, could be taking the untrodden path and coming out with various solutions. That's the ideation part. And the fourth step which Stanford University talked about was prototyping, of making a model out of it and trying to understand how it would look and feel and things like that. And the last and final step would be about testing it with people who will use it and come out with solutions. It's okay. Design thinking is majorly anthropocentric, which is basically meaning that it is based on the human being. We are trying to solve problems of the human being, and that's where design thinking comes into place. That's what Stanford University came out with. Nature-inspired design thinking is kind of tweaking this whole process of saying, instead of the 5-step process, can I make it? Can I add a couple of steps into this process so that it can add value? It can add value of bringing in learnings from nature. So it's about empathy. It's about defining the problem. And the third step is where we add of asking nature how to solve this problem, of getting into that inquiry of putting in the right kind of questions to nature. If my problem statement is, how do I design a chair? I can't ask nature, how do I design a chair? So it is about breaking the problem down into various elements, saying that how does nature transfer loads? How does nature bring in mobility? How does nature support? Various such questions. So get into that, asking nature the right kind of questions. That's the third part. And the fourth part is building the design matrix. Each of these questions, you might find solutions right from a bacteria to a whale. Right? For each of these questions, if I have to really look at how does nature transfer loads? I'm sorry. How does nature transfer loads? So we might be able to understand the load transfer from a single cell to how nature allows a blue whale to move and transfer loads in the water. So building the whole design matrix of understanding what can I take from the blue whale and what can I take from the unicellular organism, and building that whole matrix, and then coming out with a design solution, then ideating on that design solution, then creating the prototype and testing it, and then going back and forth on any iterative way of either going back to a design inquiry or going back to redefining the problem statement, and then coming out with a wonderful design problem solution.
Yeah, so actually, for most of us, it's like a very introductory kind of level we are in about biomimicry. So I think this will help us to look more into this design process, so that I think many of them are asking also questions like how to go about doing a project. So yeah, I hope your guidelines will help us to look more into this process as such.
Right. I have I will go through it through a couple of examples of how different companies have really looked at it. One example I would like to look at is a very famous example of biomimicry, which is the bullet train. If you all have seen the bullet train, the modern bullet train has got a very beak-like structure on the facade, on its front edge. Your earlier bullet train had a blunt facade, had a blunt front edge, right? So whenever this bullet train used to move through tunnels, because of the density of air, it created some kind of a sonic boom, which kind of hit the wall of air. So it definitely created some kind of a sonic boom. Number one, it also drastically reduced the speed of the train. Right? So, okay, that's the problem statement which I have to really look at. Then you start looking at redefining the problem statement and saying that how does nature move between two mediums of two different densities without cutting down its speed, without cutting down its, without having any resistance. And one of the solutions which they came out was with the kingfisher's beak. A kingfisher can hover over a surface of water, identify its fish, put its beak inside without disturbing the surface of the water, catch its fish and come back. So the moment they pulled this idea of a kingfisher's beak and then converted that into the facade of a bullet train, we have, today we have trains which moves at much faster speed. Today we have trains which have reduced their sonic boom because of this, which allows the air to transfer on that curve and move out of the train without creating some kind of a barrier for the train to enter the tunnel. So it's some kind of an understanding of how nature has helped us solve the problem. Okay. It is not definitely a cradle-to-cradle design, but something which is more about being inspired from nature and moving towards it, right? Similarly, there are many such examples. Another example is of a company called Sharklet Technologies, which looked at how the shark is able to swim at that speeds in water, even though it has a large mass. And then when they look at the micro level, the surface of the skin, it is made up of a certain geometry which influence chocolate technology to redesign the swimwear of people who can wear the clothing. So today's swimwear are completely clothed head to toe with those fabrics, which allow for easy movement inside water. And I think one of the first times it was ever used by was Michael Phillip in the Australian Olympic Games. It definitely helped him. He's come on record where he says that it definitely helped him improve his speeds, and it gave him 9 or 10 Olympic gold medals in the Australian swimming Olympics. There are many such examples. Where even in one of our workshops, which we were doing on nature-inspired design, we had a chemical engineer who was a participant who said he wanted to create a soap which does not have high acidic value. And in his understanding of the pH values of a soap versus a shower gel, a soap had acidic value, whereas a shower gel had alkaline value. And it gets the acidic value because of the hardening element which comes into it. So he was saying that how can I keep the alkaline value of a shower gel and still make it into a soap, because that is what is being used by the normal man. So then when we started looking at organisms, we looked at organisms which has a skin which allows for water movement to happen only on the unidirection, which does not allow water or liquids to move from one side of the skin onto the other side, but it allows water to move from inside to the outside. So he ended up designing a soap case, which is made up of that kind of a membrane, which allows for soap to move from inside to outside and not from outside to inside. Right? So all you need to have is to fill it up with the shower gel and use it on your body, and it still works like a soap.
Okay.
Right? So it's simple things like that. Is how can I look at nature for an inspiration there and use it as a design process?
Yes, sir. So I have one question at this point. Like you have conducted workshops with students, right? So you might have come across people from different backgrounds. So how is their response towards biomimicry, and what is the enthusiasm among students for biomimicry?
Right. One common thing is, I generally do this on a very tight schedule because of time constraints. We do it on a 6-day activity of 3 days each, where on the third or fourth day, when they're introduced to this idea of asking nature the right kind of questions and finding out from nature the various organisms which have solved their problems. That for me is a life-changing movement. Is a very frankly a very life-changing movement where they suddenly look at a problem statement as simple as designing a pen. To somebody, in one of the workshops, the group of students had just visited the Ganges and had seen half-burnt dead bodies in the river, right? And they wanted to see how nature can help them solve it. And they came out with certain mechanisms being inspired from nature to design certain mechanisms so that you have this social image that I would want my half-burnt bodies to go into the river, because that's a cultural thing for me. I would want my body to be a part of the Ganges. At the same time, how do I look at it as non-polluting? So they could look at nature-inspired design thinking processes. A bit that it was purely at the conceptual level, that they could look at certain organisms in nature which can help them not pollute the body in the water, at the same time allow the body to be a part as a part of the immersive process as a cultural system. So we have found answers to that. We've had CFOs of various companies being a part of this system and trying to understand how ants can help them economize their whole process. Right. One of the examples, not in our workshop, of course, but the Southwest Airlines in the United, is it the Southeast or Southwest? I forgot. The airlines in the United States have used the learnings from ant colonies to the way they disperse their passengers into the flight, which allows for faster boarding, which allows for easy disbursement of people along the flight for faster movement and lesser user fuel in the aircraft. So, yeah, it could get into any level. It could get into a management system of a company to designing a huge product like an aircraft.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting to know. Like, I usually like ants. Like, we have a lot of interesting things to learn. So, yeah. Now, this is also one more like a follow-up kind of question. So, as you mentioned about companies, so what would be response or inclination of investors or maybe target companies towards this approach, like nature-inspired?
Right. Personally, okay, I personally haven't come across too many people who are working on this. But why I'm saying that this is a sunrise industry is that I see this as a very futuristic um, must-have process in any company in the coming days. Um, we always try to solve a problem when it hits us most. Unfortunately, uh, but we need to go into that forethought or literally looking at how we can solve problems without digging our own graves. Right? Only when we know that the grave is quite deep, we start trying to fill it up. So I see that it's a need. I would definitely see that it's going to be the future of a lot of companies. We see that Apple is moving towards zero emissions as a company in the next 15, 20 years of time. And they've already started doing various things into their products. There are a lot of companies which are looking at nature-inspired design. There has been companies which have been looking at nature-inspired design for eons to come. I mean, say any of the aircrafts we see, look at various types of flight, the hovering flight, the gliding, the beating, many kinds of flight, which is being used in the design of aircrafts. So I definitely see this as a norm in the coming days. So it's a sunrise industry for me. And you will find a lot of companies getting into, I don't know about the Indian setup, but across the world, there are a lot of startup companies working on nature-inspired design thinking strongly.
Sure. So now I have a question which is more specific to your profession, like housing solutions, right? So there are I somewhere read in an article that there are n number of examples for housing solutions from like organisms, from living creatures. So what is your take on this? So I also read about this sleep routines, which can act like smartphones because they can regulate the temperature and so on. So what is your thought on housing solutions using bio?
Right. Yeah, it's at multiple levels, very frankly. For an architect, nature-inspired could be at multiple levels. One could be of understanding climate and being responsive to the climate, like you rightly said. We did work on one such concept of an anthill influencing one of our buildings in North Karnataka called Ilkal, where temperatures soar up to almost 46, 47 degrees. But using certain systems which we borrowed from nature and put it onto our build form with the available materials, we are able to control temperatures by almost 15 degrees, 15 to 16 degrees inside the house. And that's a huge saving for a house like in Ilkal, like using the wind catchers used in an anthill and things like that. Where we manage, even in summer, only in peak summer during the afternoons, they use a fan. So we can use climate responsive architecture. We can look at structural systems because the way we use materials today, we still work with a 90-degree idea of transferring loads on a 90-degree, or column and beams are 90 degrees. Nowhere in nature do we find columns and beams or load transfers happening on a 90-degree. So if I have to really look at this idea of load transfers in nature, and in one of our projects for another college, we were designing a school, again, where we looked at the tree and said that can we incline the columns inward on the ground floor and outward on the first floor? What does it do for our structural systems by keeping the center of gravity constant? And that brought in a reduction of the consumption of steel by almost 30%. If versus keeping it at 90 degrees. I'm sure you'll find a lot more different ways of solving it to bring down that same load transfer to even 10% of what we were earlier using on a 90 degree. Yeah, it's something which we keep on researching on. To another level, which could be about coming out with new materials. We are still working on materials which are taken out from Mother Earth, but can I look at chemically forming new materials which can become food for another process after its death? There are a few people who are working on bricks made out of algae, right? So the structure grows because of algae growth and then disintegrates after its given time of usage. Things like that. So a lot of temporary housing can be designed based on that system.
Okay.
So it's a very futuristic thought, but yes, somebody needs to make a start.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, this is like one follow-up question from what you said. So, is there a like specific difference between recycling and using a nature-inspired design technique?
Right. We always work with the 5 R's, right? Reuse, reduce, recycle, refuse, and things like that. But I think we forget the most important R, which is to redesign. I think whatever we do with the 5 R's, the final product is it becomes a part of the landfill.
Yeah.
Right. But if I start working on the top R, which is redesign, can I redesign any process, any product, any design element, any problem which we want to solve with an idea that it becomes food for another process at the end of its life? Then we are following nature's principle. And that is where I see nature-inspired design thinking coming at the top R, right? Whereas the remaining 5 R's are only delaying our grave. The redesign would be removing the grave from the equation.
Yeah, so
I hope I answered that question of yours.
Yeah. So there might be a misconception, like recycling and biomimicry are the same thing. So we need to understand that redesign is the most important distinguishing element. So I have one question from the audience. Are there any generalized design patterns formulated from studying nature? I have seen that there are similar patterns in software engineering. Can you also quote some examples of systematic?
Yeah, I got the gist of the problem statement, but I thought that there was a delay. There's some delay or lag in your question.
Okay.
Is my audio clear to everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So as I mentioned earlier, if we are looking at the 7-stage process which we have worked out, borrowed from even parts of design thinking from Stanford and parts of what we learned from Biomimicry Institute, this 7-stage process is one process which we are following right now to really get into that inquiry of nature, of asking nature the right kind of questions and coming out with solutions. We have had some amazing ways of looking at problem solving in our workshops. We have had students of 10th standard, we have had 6th standard students working with PhD holders together on coming out with some solutions. So it's been quite unique. And each one comes out with their own patterns. Each one comes out with their, even though the problem statement might be the same, the solutions might be different because somebody would have looked at a butterfly, somebody would have looked at an amoeba, somebody would have looked at a shark for solving the same problem. The solutions might be different. So, but there's a process which we have come out with in our nature-inspired design thinking workshops where we try and use that, which I shared with you earlier, the 7-step process.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Now I have one more question. Like for example, if we want to use nature, for example, I used to work on craft with silk. So silk, I try to use it for making a biocomposite.
I'm not able to hear you, madam. I'm not able to hear you. There's a lot of disturbance from you.
Okay. Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there still a disturbance or is it fine?
There's a small lag in the way I'm getting your message, but I'll try and figure that out. Do shoot out.
Okay. Is it happening only now or is it happening since long time?
It's happening for the past couple of decades.
Okay. It's because I'm streaming. I'm also streaming simultaneously, and I'm also talking to Gmail. Maybe that's why. Yeah.
Right. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So I have a specific example. Like for example, silk being used as a biocomposite. Like it has different applications. So one of them is impact strength, and it's a mechanical application. But usually silk is being used as a very useful biomedical material and it's very popular. But when we want to use it for a mechanical application, it might not be that robust to use it in an industrial system. So how to overcome these limitations?
Right. It kind of takes me down to one observation of the spider's webs. The spider silk is one of the best, most tensile, load-bearing, material in nature. The kind of you have spiders which can spit out web 25 meters across the rivulet, and somewhere catch even flying birds on their webs. Right. So definitely, as you rightly said. Usage of any material research, it's quite at its nascent stage right now. And people like you who are working on material research or literally pushing it to another level of literally trying to see if I can mass produce. I mean, just imagine if I can mass produce spiders' silk as reinforcement bars for my buildings. I would be able to use 1/100th of the steel I'm using, or redefine the way I would span my buildings. We had an architect called Buckminster who looked at the composition of the carbon-60 atom and said that, and he had in fact designed a spear which could cover the city of New York structurally. Right. So it is very much at the nascent stage, and material scientists in our research institutes should literally look at how nature comes out with their materials and try and help us out, designers, to solve that problem.
Sure.
I would put the ball back into the research institutes.
Okay. Yeah. I have a follow-up question from what you just said. What do you think? How do you think we can make a successful collaboration between interdisciplinary researchers and designers?
Yeah, The future is all about collaboration. The future is not purely about only specialization and moving away. I think the future is all about collaborations, and the need for institutes and designers to collaborate. I mean, is primordial. Is of very high importance today, because until you have a biologist, a naturalist on board of a design team, or a designer on board of a management team, you will not be able to bring about this change, right? Um, uh, a follow-up answer to what you were talking about earlier is about getting a material scientist to come and study how I can mass produce web silk, spider silk, and giving it onto the hands of a designer who can pull out new design solutions using that is the need of the hour. Excuse me. Right. So similarly, a material scientist who can come out and tell me this is how you can design a chair, the fabric of a chair, and that does not go back into a landfill, right? Or maximum we are doing right now is to reuse or upcycle things. But can I make it fit for another process itself? Can I allow it to decompose into becoming a part of Mother Earth again?
Sure. Yeah. So now I would like to have some rapid fire questions. So these are just for fun. So it may not be really technical. First one is: do you think humans are more clever or nature is clever?
Nature is far better, far cleverer than human beings.
Okay. The next one is: would you say nature is reality or it's just an illusion?
Pardon? Nature
Is
is?
nature a reality concept or it is just an illusion?
Nature is the only reality.
Okay. Sir, but everything in nature keeps changing, right? Whatever existed before does not exist now. So whatever existing now will not exist later.
Isn't change the necessity for being real? Otherwise, you'll get stagnant.
Okay. Okay.
Change is the most important thing, and otherwise we would have remained, cave dwellers or even nomadics.
Okay. The next question is: what is one thing that will be very difficult for humans to mimic from nature?
I think nature has a strong element of time in it, right? Like I said, 4.5 billion years versus 50,000 years. So, if I have to really look at a species, dinosaurs were one of the longest dwellers of planet Earth. I think they were here for almost 250 million years outdwelling. And during one extinction period, almost 95% of the species were wiped out at one time in Earth's evolution. And then the 5% has evolved further into where we are today. So I think nature has time on its edge. It will continue to survive in its different forms. We don't have that edge. We might have another 50,000 years at our disposal. Whatever we are talking today, do you think BC is too far away? Whatever we took at timelines, right? Whatever we are talking about, even historically, we are talking about 400, 500 years old, or maximum a few BC years old, which is hardly 2,500 years, 3,000 years old. Nature has evolved for 4.5 billion years.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was not a rapid question.
Okay. So next question is, if you would like to get one superpower from any of the organisms, what will be that?
To decompose.
Okay.
I think if I'm able to design something which can decompose, I think that's the most brilliant superpower I can get from nature.
Okay. Yeah. Last question is, in the next few years, would you like to see yourself as a successful author, or someone like a Nobel laureate, or someone like the richest CEO?
Okay, I think author would be a better scalable thing for me right now.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that's it from my side. So I'll just check if there are any other questions from the audience. Uh, yeah, there's one question from the audience. How can we deal with scaling issues when we talk about biomimicry?
How can we deal with?
Scaling issues. How to mass manufacture bio-inspired designs.
Yeah, nature-inspired designs are basically at the conceptual level, are basically at the ideation level. I wouldn't say conceptual level, at the ideation level. And that kind of a thought process can be scaled up. I mean, you can take this idea. I mean, we were talking about designing of swimwear using the chocolate technologies, the shock technologies, and that can be multifold. I mean, if I'm getting solutions of using the silk web, I can multiply it in any number of things, and also minimize the use of natural resources. I'll give you a simple example. Say, for example, the laptop which we use, which is hardly 3 kgs in weight, takes out close to around 12,000 kgs of resources from Mother Earth when it's being extracted. Right? And when I throw a laptop into a landfill, I'm not just throwing 3 kgs, I'm throwing all that 12,000 kgs of resources I've borrowed from Mother Earth. Now, if I redesign a laptop which can decompose and become food for another process, I'm just thinking loud. If I can design a laptop which can decompose and becomes food for another process, I don't throw anything into a landfill. Right? Today, from space, there are only 2 things which are visible, which are man-made on planet Earth. One is the Great Wall of China, and the other one is the landfill of New York.
Yeah. So that I think that is
because today, very frankly, if all of us starts living like an American, an average American, if we all start living, we literally require 7 Earths to survive today. I want to bring to notice that there's this idea of Earth Overshoot Day, which is being done by the United Nations supported Footprint Association or whatever, which talks about when do we overshoot in a year, that year's resources, right? It's a very important concept which we need to really understand. Earth has a capacity to replenish its resources. Could be in the sense of water, good air, minerals, food, whatever. It has a capacity to replenish itself. Right? From 1985 onwards, we've been consuming more than what the Earth can replenish in a year. So today, thanks to COVID, where we had a complete lockdown of all industries, everything, for almost 2 to 3 months, the Earth Overshoot Day shifted from August 1st to August 20th, which gave me hope, frankly, COVID gave me hope that human beings can repair themselves. Which means that if I continue, I mean, it is being stated that by 2030, we will need 2 Earths to survive on a regular basis. We don't have 2 Earths, madam. We have only 1 Earth. for us to get all our resources. And we need to get into that drastic shift to really understand how can I minimize waste? How can I use less from Mother Earth? And it's very critical for us right now.
So, so that's it from my end and also from the audience. So, if you would like to have some closing comments or any other advice for us for aspiring civil environment.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity from IIT Madras. It was great to be on this platform. But I think we need to be environmentally conscious in whatever we're doing right now. I think that would be the parting words, and say that let us be conscious of what we are doing. I don't think we can be eco-friendly yet. We can only be environmentally conscious. And that's the first path towards moving towards being an environmentally friendly species. Let's move on that idea. And Humpy Center of Design, I would like to just take a couple of minutes on. This is a center which is working on a design dialogue, and one of the most strong design dialogues with Humpy Center of Design has been working is about being environmentally conscious, or on looking at nature as an inspiration, working on various things. But there are a lot of dialogues which were happening on parallel fronts at Humpy Center of Design. And in the COVID season, we've been doing similar workshops, doing similar webinars on the platform. And in fact, every Wednesday, every Saturday at 4 o'clock, we do have a webinar where we have various artists and designers coming and sharing their thoughts about the way they work with design. And we've been having a lot of youngsters coming and presenting their works. In fact, today evening also, we do have you can follow us on Instagram, Humpy Center for Design, CENTER for Design, to get more inputs. And there are a lot of other activities which we are doing. So do follow us on Humpy Center of Design to get a lot more inputs. And I'm really happy IITM is doing this weekly activity, similar activity, and exposing people to a lot of interesting thought processes. I congratulate you on doing this activity too, madam.
Sure, sir. Thank you. We are very happy to have you as a guest today, and we are very happy to know about your initiative. So I think it will be a great platform for people who are really interested in pursuing something serious about bioenergy. So, I'm sure they will follow your page and also check out some of your comments. So thank you once again for joining us today in the middle of, I think it's in the afternoon. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that opportunity. Also, we do curate nature-inspired design thinking workshops for various organizations, or we do workshops on that too. So anybody would want us to help them curate a program, we would definitely be interested to work with you on that.
Sure, sir. We'll keep this in mind and check out for future possibilities of working together.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
We are available on YouTube as Career Development Cell Research IIT Madras. If you want to find us on Instagram, LinkedIn or Facebook, you can type IIT Madras Research Affairs Teams. If you want to write us, you can mail us at cdc_research@sml.iitm.ac.in.